Subscribe now if you're brave enough to keep watching. Ethan Miles had just finished his shift at Miller's Diner. It was one of those nights where the weight of exhaustion pressed down on him like a heavy cloud. The day had been long, and the fog creeping in through the windows of the diner seemed to match his mood. He was looking forward to getting home, to curling up in his bed and escaping the restless rhythm of the night. But the thought of taking the long, boring highway back to his apartment made him groan. Instead, he saw at the sign for Raven's Bend Road, a shortcut. He'd heard the whispers, of course, the locals' warnings about the road being cursed, about cars dying for no reason, of figures seen moving between the trees in the dead of night. But Ethan wasn't the type to believe in ghost stories. He'd grown up in this town, hearing those tales all his life. They were just that, stories. He shook off the thought, turned his car towards the road, and stepped on the gas. The deeper Ethan drove into the woods, the heavier the silence became. The kind of quiet that felt like it was pressing in from all sides. His old Honda hummed steadily, the only sound other than the occasional rustle of branches brushing against the car. The road was narrow, the trees towering above him like dark sentinels. A thick fog rolled across the asphalt, distorting the light from his headlights. Ethan turned the radio up, but instead of the usual music, there was only static. Then, faintly, a voice garbled and distant came through. "Don't stop." Ethan froze, his hand still gripping the steering wheel, his breath caught in his throat. He glanced nervously at the radio, but the voice was gone, replaced by the usual static. Shaking his head, he tried to convince himself it was just his mind playing tricks. But as he continued down the road, things only grew worse. The air seemed to get colder, thicker, and with every turn of the wheel, the trees around him seemed to close in tighter. And then, just as he was about to turn a sharp bend, he saw something in the distance. A figure, tall, thin, and eerily still, standing just at the edge of the road, its face hidden in shadow. His heart skipped a beat. He slowed the car, but as he passed, the figure disappeared. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel, the unease gnawing at him. There was no turning back now. Ethan pressed harder on the gas, desperate to shake off the eerie feeling that had settled in his chest. His car hummed steadily along the winding road, the fog now so thick it seemed to have swallowed everything: the trees, the roadside, and even the starlit sky above. It felt like he was driving through an endless sea of mist, each mile stretching into another, and the road ahead was as empty and uncertain as his growing sense of dread. As he turned another sharp corner, his headlights flickered and then cut out entirely. The sudden darkness made his stomach drop. He fumbled with the switch, panic rising in his chest as he tried to get the lights back on. For a long moment he was driving blind, the only sounds the pounding of his own heartbeat and the hum of his engine struggling against the dark. The car sputtered, stuttering before the lights flickered back to life. The road ahead was dim and hazy, but that wasn't the worst part. No. The worst part was the noise, the strange scraping sound, like nails on a chalkboard, coming from the undercarriage. Ethan slammed on the brakes, pulling the car to a jerky stop. He sat there for a moment, breathless, staring at the road. The trees seemed to lean closer, casting long shadows across the hood of his car. Was it just the fog, or had something just moved in the corner of his eye? With trembling hands, he stepped out of the car, his flashlight beam cutting through the mist. The air was dead still. He crouched beside the tires, inspecting for any damage, but saw nothing that would explain the sound. His breath came in short gasps, and he felt a creeping sense of unease washing over him. Something wasn't right. He stood up quickly, scanning the empty road around him. The hairs on his neck stood on end, and then, behind him, he heard it. A soft crunch, as though someone was stepping on gravel. Ethan turned quickly, flashlight shaking in his hand. But there was nothing. No one. He swallowed hard, trying to ignore the way his heart was pounding in his ears. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered. Ethan turned back to his car, but before he could get back inside, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, eyes wide. The screen showed a voice memo, recorded at 2:17 a.m., the exact time he had entered the tunnel. He hadn't touched it. Slowly, almost unwillingly, he pressed play. What he heard made his blood freeze. Static, faint breathing, and then his own voice, whispering, "Turn around." Ethan's gaze shifted to the rearview mirror. His breath hitched in his throat as he stared at the empty back seat, but the fear was too overwhelming, and before he could react, the headlights blinked out again, followed by a suffocating silence. When Ethan's car was found the next morning, it was parked neatly across the center of Ravens Bend Road, the headlights dim and the engine cold. The truck driver who had reported the abandoned vehicle said there was no sign of Ethan. No one had seen him leave, and his phone, wallet, and keys were left on the passenger seat. The door was ajar, the interior light faintly flickering, but there were no traces of his footprints or any signs that he had stepped out of the car. Sheriff Dalton and Deputy Clara arrived at the scene shortly after, their boots crunching through the frost as they examined the car. The first thing that struck them was the absence of any damage to the vehicle. The road was still wet from the night's mist, but there were no skid marks, no signs of an accident. As Clara walked around the car, she noticed the faintest hint of fresh soil on the ground, leading from the driver's side toward the woods, but the soil was barely disturbed, as though someone had brushed past without leaving a trace. The strangest thing, however, was the phone. Clara picked it up and noticed the screen was cracked, yet still glowing. She tapped it, and the last recorded file appeared a 3-minute voice memo. Sheriff Dalton leaned over her shoulder, his face grim as the audio played. The static crackled and then faded into heavy breathing, followed by Ethan's trembling voice, barely audible. "Don't stop. Please, don't stop." Clara's eyes flicked to the car's dashboard. The dashcam had been running when they found the car. She retrieved the SD card and played the footage back at the station. What she saw on the screen made her blood run cold. Ethan's car was cruising down the road at 2:00 a.m. as the timestamp showed, the video clearly capturing the mist and fog around him. But something was off. The headlights briefly illuminated a figure tall, thin, and pale standing just off the side of the road. It lasted only a split second, but Ethan's reaction was unmistakable. The car swerved suddenly, almost as though he had tried to avoid something. The camera flickered. When it came back into view, Ethan was no longer in the driver's seat. The car was still moving. But Ethan's hands weren't on the steering wheel. The pale, long-fingered hands of an unknown figure gripped the wheel, steering the car through the mist as though it was being driven by an unseen force. The footage zoomed in on the back seat. showing the outline of something shifting. Something slowly rising from the shadows, a figure whose face was nothing but hollow, empty eyes staring back at the camera. Clara paused the footage. "What the hell is that?" she whispered. Sheriff Dalton exhaled slowly. "It's not him. Whatever this thing is, it's not him anymore." They watched the footage to the end. The car coasted to a stop, the headlights flickering one last time. Then, the camera's red light blinked out, and the screen went to static. That evening, Dalton and Clara led a search through the woods, hoping for some clue, anything to explain what had happened to Ethan. The fog thickened as they trudged deeper into the trees, their flashlights illuminating the trail ahead. Hours passed, and the deeper they went, the more eerie the atmosphere became. But then one of the dogs began to bark frantically, pulling the handlers toward a clearing. What they found there was chilling, a small trail of footprints leading toward an old rotted sign nailed to a tree. The sign was half buried in the dirt, and as Sheriff Dalton wiped away the moss, the words became clear. "Raven's Bend, do not enter after dusk." Behind the sign, the trail split into two paths. The team had lost their GPS signal, and there was no way to proceed with their equipment. The air grew heavy, the silence unsettling. Then they reached the second path. One of the deputies called out, "Sheriff, come here." Underneath a pile of roots, half buried in the mud, lay a tire the same brand, same size as Ethan's car. Etched into the sidewall was a message, carved deep into the rubber. "Don't stop driving." The discovery left them shaken, but the terror didn't end there. The next morning, reports came flooding in. People near Raven's Bend began hearing strange noises at night, whispers that sounded like a car engine revving in the distance. Some claimed to see headlights flickering through the trees, a car they couldn't explain. The whispers on the wind were the same each time, "Don't stop." By the third week, Raven's Bend Road was closed permanently. No one dared drive through it anymore, but still, the chilling tales persisted. They said, if you listen closely on clear nights, you might hear the sound of a car engine idling in the distance, a car that no one ever sees but always feels. And if you ever find yourself on that stretch of dark, empty road, where the fog rolls thick and the silence is overwhelming, remember the one warning left behind. Don't stop. If you do, you might never leave.